Welcome to the Lost and Found podcast. I'm joined by returning guest and now dear friend, Justin Lovato. And in this episode, as always, when him and I connect, we start to weave through aspects of life in a more explorative way. We look at things from the levels of consciousness. We talk about conscious consumerism, how when we eat, watch, wear different things, how it can affect our state. And we just generally catch up about life, what has been going on for each of us, how we interpret certain things, how we navigate things that are potentially a little more difficult, and ultimately, as is the case very often with the Lost and Found podcast. We get into conversations that are slightly more esoteric, spiritual, and in the realms of consciousness exploration. Now, before we get started, I have one ask and one offer. The ask is if you are watching on YouTube and you haven't yet subscribed, to please do that and like this video if you enjoy it. And secondly, I relaunched the free community call that I used to host last year, and I've started it back up 2 Thursdays a month. It's a place where like-minded people get together and we explore different topics of self-exploration, consciousness, the esoteric, and the types of things we enjoy talking about on this podcast. So if that calls to you and you'd like to join, hit the link below and you'll be able to register for that. All right, that's it from me. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Justin. There will also be the links to be able to find him below. All right, brother. So we decided to just hit record and not have any catch up beforehand. And I like that. I like to be able to just let's get straight in there. And yeah, man, how have you been?
Really, really good. I think I think, how long has it been since we last connected? Has it been like what, 8 months maybe? 8 months around there?
Yeah, I don't know if it's been this year. I know you shared with me what had been going on with a whole load of the
Oh yeah,
business
yeah,
things and
yeah,
the con artist and all of that. So
yeah, yeah.
that was alive for you in that moment, and I think that was the last time we really,
Chatted.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think that just passed, I think a year. So yeah, I think we were actually maybe then closer to maybe 10 months ago. Since then, everything has been, even during that process, I was literally looking at it as an opportunity to see what was here for me as opposed to happening to me. So, wonderful things have continued to unfold within not just my business, but also my personal life. I've now entered into a wonderful divine union, a wonderful relationship. She has moved here with me here in Austin, Texas. So that's been a wonderful shift, a wonderful change as well. And we actually just moved into a new spot about a month ago, right around the corner from the old space, but bigger and better, which has been wonderful. We both work from home. She does similar work, mentoring as I do, so we needed some more space.
Mm.
But yeah, everything's actually been absolutely wonderful. Yeah, I can't express the gratitude that I have right now for how life is going.
That's beautiful, man. I'm really
Yeah,
glad to hear that.
thank you, thank you. How are you?
It's funny, whenever I get asked that question recently, my go-to thing's like, yeah, good. And good is the answer, but also it's been wild. Things have been wild, and it's been, when life gives you the opportunities to kind of go warp speed into
Mm,
growth and exploration and looking of what needs to be cleared out in me, if anything is coming up.
mm,
And I'd say it's been like that really for the last year.
mm,
The last year. And sometimes when I pause to reflect, I think, I've been handling those things pretty well. I've been handling the, sometimes you got to give yourself that moment of recognition.
mm,
And yeah, I mean, still amazing. Life still continues to give me these incredible opportunities, and it's just a reminder of how much we are held by life,
yeah.
regardless of what is going on, regardless of how crazy the ocean might be in certain times.
Mm.
It's like, yeah, it continues to have that faith, and ultimately still just being carried, like a continuation of the journey that I'm meant to be on.
Yeah.
But it's been, yeah, it's been a crazy year.
Yeah. I love how you use that term faith because that's something that I learned a bit ago. I think I might have mentioned this on the last podcast when I was going through that powerful trial and tribulation, those big waves, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I learned that, life will always have its trials and tribulations, its challenges, its uncomfortable moments, its craziness. And when I learned that I operate by my values, that I operate with unconditional love, that I operate with an open heart, no matter what,
Mhm.
man, that in a way, even though it doesn't make those times essentially easy or simple, but it did simplify it.
Mhm.
It did simplify it for me tremendously. And it's something that I really express to my clients. Like when you decide to, no matter what, stay unconditional, to keep your heart open during all moments, it actually simplifies the process, at least for me. And I really look at wonderful, powerful um, icons, deities, characters in life like Jesus. Whenever I feel like closing, whenever I feel like playing small or contracting or what have you, I always look at his story and how he was always able to stay unconditional during the most challenging moments that anybody could possibly ever go to. His story is such labor throughout the entire thing, and even in the worst cases, the worst times, the worst parts, forgive them. They do not know what they do. I can stay open. I can stay in love, and that has served me tremendously as we navigate um, the crazy waves. And man, it's been incredible, and that faith, that knowing, has served me tremendously.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and I love how you evoked Jesus in that because I regularly wear
The
a
cross.
cross, and
Yeah.
I can't claim Christianity
Mm,
because I don't believe the Christian narrative of Jesus was the Son of God in the way in which
mm,
it's told within the Christian story. However,
mm,
I do
mm.
believe Jesus was one of, if not the most profound spiritual teacher.
Yeah, I align with that as well. Yeah,
Yeah,
I align with that. Yeah.
yeah. And when Jesus said, "Deny yourself, pick up your cross, and come with me," I've really contemplated that. To deny yourself, I think a lot of people get turned off by the idea of self denial, but I think what Jesus was pointing to was the conceptual self, the egoic self.
Mm, mm.
To deny that and the stories that come with that, the limiting stories, any place that we have resistance and rejection and anger or resentment, it's usually in the story of the separate egoic self. And I
Correct.
believe Jesus was saying, deny that self
Yes. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
pick up your cross. What is a cross? It's a symbol of sacrifice.
Mm,
What is it that I have to sacrifice? What
mm.
part of my story, what part of my maybe lower self desires, what maybe some of the desires to condemn or to judge, again, the desires of that
The
separate self.
ego.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, pick up that cross and then come with me. Like, let's go to the promised land. Let's head up to the highest points and I've really been with that for a few months, and it's why I started wearing this as a reminder. It's when those
Yeah.
thoughts arise, understand what they belong to, what self they belong to, and deny that self because it's not the truth. The truth is love, and love. God is love, and God is truth, and
Hmm.
it's to connect to that. Yeah.
I really love that because one of the stories I read Adya Shanta's book, Resurrecting Jesus, and he really does an amazing job of of sharing Jesus' story from his perspective, and it's something that I also align with. And we're all going through this awakening process. And I believe that, like, Jesus's quote unquote awakening was his baptism, and I think that's the term that maybe Christianity uses for the awakening, when spirit enters into the body, right? When spirit realizes it's actually incarnation in human form.
Mm.
And so when Jesus went through his awakening or baptism, what happened next was him going into the desert for 40 days and 40 nights, essentially back into the matrix. We all have these awakenings, whether it's through plant medicine, whether it's through breath work and meditation, some form, we remember.
Mm.
And then once we remember, we kind of come back into this space, this desert, this matrix, if you will. And we're going to be going through our trials and tribulations, which is the temptation from the ego self, the small self, the devil self, so to speak.
Yeah.
And the ability to deny that, as you say, or look at it with an open heart and resist the pleasures, resist the temptations, resist the judgments, resist the fear, what have you, the tugging, pulling, the reaching. So that story was really powerful for me. And it's one that I use with, again, my clients as well. Is like, once we awaken, we have to come back in. And this is also what the spiritual community calls our shadow work.
Yeah.
This is the shadow work, and it's in our behaviors, it's in our atomic habits, it's in our thoughts, it's in our words.
Mm.
And having the ability to open our hearts in that space during those trials and tribulations is, I think, the ultimate test, is the school that we're actually in. And what has given me the ability, I would say, to keep my heart open or stay in the seat of awareness, stay in the seat of Christ consciousness, is really coming down to my practices, my breath work, my meditations,
Mm.
but more specifically, my conscious consumerism, essentially the walking of the walk, not just the talking, through action, because in the end, love is an action.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I know we touched on conscious consumerism the first time we
Hmm.
spoke, and as I feel that now, it's because there's a choice in that moment of consuming. There is a choice, and it's, what am I choosing beyond the whatever this appears to be? There is something greater than it that I am also choosing. And what you mentioned about Jesus in the desert, and again, this is a contemplation I've had and I've asked other people, and it's, where in your life do you enter the wilderness where the devil shows up to tempt you?
Mm, that's a great question. To be honest, it doesn't show up too much anymore, which is really beautiful.
Mm.
I've been doing such wonderful work, but I think, as I mentioned in the last podcast, that was a big moment, when someone took advantage of my kindness and opening my heart to that individual in that very moment. I mean, I'm very thankful I was already doing my work and my practices and connecting on a very high level. So when that trial and tribulation came from an individual that I truly loved and took in and trusted, when that betrayal, so to speak, and I wouldn't even call it betrayal, because then it's a bit more personal, when the unconscious behavior
Mm.
happened due to them being asleep in the trance of their own ego mind, I was able to see it as that. I, I also, what allows me, I would say, to not get triggered and fall into that temptation of judgment or taking things personally, was truly understanding that that is also then me falling back into my ego. And and I also got away from labeling things as good or bad when it comes to what's happening in my reality.
Mm.
So reality is just reality. So I don't label it as bad. It's just what is. And I understand that when individuals act from a place um, of ego, um, I understand that it's strictly just an unconscious space.
Mhm.
And so I choose to not take it personally, not label it as bad. It's just what's happening. And the best thing that I can do to serve that individual or that circumstance, and even myself, is to see God within them, to
Mm.
send them love in that very moment, whether it's telepathic love or speaking words vibrationally of love to that individual. And that's all I can do. That's all I can do without needing anything from them for me to be okay. And so, I've definitely been tested, so to speak, but I think because I'm so on top of my practices, which allows me to sit in the seat of awareness really well, I would have to say where I do get challenged the most are the people that are incredibly close to me. I would
Mm.
say if I do contract or do close, it's usually with a family member or my partner. It's because it becomes a little bit more personal
Mm.
when I feel misunderstood. Um, but nothing too major, to be honest. I'm able to reopen. Um, but yeah, it's as Ram Dass always says, if you think you're conscious, hang around your family for the weekend, and there's a wonderful test. And I think that's where most of us actually struggle, is with our parents, with our brothers and sisters, with our partners. So I think if I were to really kind of pinpoint where I've been tested, it's always within our close relationships and
Yeah.
the ability to stay in love in those moments. It always seems to be a bit harder, I would say. But even those moments, I see them as wonderful opportunities to expand, and I have. So I'm actually really grateful for those moments.
Yeah, it feels like it's the people that are the closest to us because we tend to care about them
Yeah,
the
yeah.
most. And then if we are misunderstood, if we are trying to come from a place of love, and I found this, it's not so much if my partner might do something that feels like towards me. It's usually if what I have done as an act of love is taken to be the wrong way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
Misunderstanding.
I find that more difficult.
Yeah, that's my whole thing. If that happens, that's exactly what it is. Like I say something and it's taken the wrong way. I feel misunderstood, and then I almost seek to correct it so that she sees me in the light that I wish
Yeah.
or need to be validated. But I've been able to catch that too. I've been able to speak my piece, like, hey, this is not what was intended. This is what I intended. And then if she can see it, great. If she can't, that's also great. And I can also let that go and not need the validation or need her to see me for me to be okay. And that was a wonderful series of tests that I've now also worked through. It's really wonderful. I believe even that has come and gone now.
Yeah, yeah, that one I find tricky, and it's interesting because I know there's this narrative that most people hold, and especially in the areas of doing the introspection and the inner work, that if we get down to it, we all just want to be loved.
Mm,
But I think sometimes it's, and my partner and I, we have done this, and it's interesting because it actually almost seems to be more meaningful. Yes, we can say I love you. But when one of us will say to the other, you love me, which is to make the declaration that I
mm,
know you love me,
mm.
to actually receive the other's love fully. And I actually think we don't just want to be loved, I think we actually yearn to have our love received by others.
That's brilliant. I love that. That's cool. That's a wonderful technique, and I think it kind of stops everything dead in its tracks, so to speak. The ego really doesn't know what to do with that. I like that.
Yeah, and because actually, for a lot of people to actually fully be in the receiving of love, the ego, all the story that I might tell myself about why I'm not lovable, I actually
Hmm.
have to put that down and surrender and just actually be able
Hmm.
to see. Because if I can see my beloved loves me and I can declare that, I'm actually seeing her accurately, and in that moment, she is
Yeah,
seen and she is received.
yeah. That's great. That's great, man. Brilliant. I'll definitely use that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting, and it's interesting when you do it with other people. I'll do it on group calls sometimes, where
Mm,
I'll get everyone else to say "you love me," and you can see sometimes it's difficult for people to be able to admit that they are loved.
mm, hmm.
But to say "I love you," actually might be easy for them. I can give my love, but can I actually
Mm,
fully confess the fact that I am lovable?
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's brilliant. I love that. Yeah, I think the last time we spoke, you were just entering into this relationship as well. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So
Wonderful.
we met in Belgium at Mark Gaffney's mystery school. We met there, and you
How
know,
cool is that? Yeah, that's
right,
cool.
well, here's what's
Yeah.
wild. Here's what's wild. I mean, the entire story of the last year has been wild, to be honest, with her and I. I 2 days before the event, I still wasn't 100% sure if I was going because there was other things that I had to navigate, and I hadn't booked my flights. And I was looking at flights, and I had the thought of I might just leave it. And then I do receive this at times. I feel like I receive a guidance which I would have
Mm,
one time said to be an external voice. Now, in clarification, I actually think it is more of the I above the self that comes through.
mm.
And it came through, but I was shown, and it was as clear as anything. It was no, go to Belgium because you're going to meet a woman that will be significant.
Wow.
And I wasn't looking at the time to enter into a relationship. That wasn't the
Mm,
space I was in. And I've learned to, when I hear it come through, where it interrupts me and stops me in my tracks, I've learned to listen. So
yeah.
I went ahead, I booked my flights, and I actually, Colette was the first person I met in the airport.
Oh, wow.
We actually met in the airport, and we just instantly connected. And yeah,
Mm,
every night we were there, we were up talking till like 3 a.m. at the earliest. I think 5 was the latest.
wow.
Every night. And she's from the States, but she's been back and forth to here. Spent some maybe 2 months here, then maybe back for a month or a couple of weeks. And so yeah, that was this time a year ago. It was the 21st of August that her and I met. So yeah,
Damn.
it's been a year, and it's definitely offered me an enormous space for growth.
Yeah. Well, all relationships, that's what makes relationships so beautiful. I think a lot of people, without realizing it, avoid relationships because it requires so much growth. It requires us to really look within ourselves to step up.
Hmm.
Like we can get really comfortable with ourselves. We can get pretty lazy with ourselves when we're spending that much time with ourselves. And I know for sure that I have always grown significantly within relationships, whether they're platonic or romantic. But when you really enter into a divine union um, as a man, um, and the woman truly starts to surrender and trust and allow, there is a responsibility, a weight, if you will, to that relationship, to that person, to that woman. And man, that weight is immense. It's incredibly powerful. It feels like physical weight. And if you aren't aware enough, if you do have the thoughts of unworthiness, of not being capable, if you carry that story or program, I can imagine it could be crushing and terrifying for many people. And I think that's why a lot of people avoid relationships, especially powerful, devoted, divine unions.
Yeah.
And I remember when I really entered into this space with my partner Gina. I felt that weight immensely. I think it was the first night that she slept over, and I woke up and I felt that weight, that responsibility of what I was entering into.
Yeah.
And man, it has allowed me to rise to a self that I, yeah, at that time didn't know existed. I expanded due to that weight, that responsibility. I've learned so much. I've grown so much. I like it's been absolutely wonderful. Um, and also very hard, but in
Mhm.
a really wonderful way, in a way that forces you to show up, to really do the practices, do the work. I mean, I was already on top of my stuff for the most part because, like I said, there was already a time in my life where I realized, like, okay, like this is how I operate because this is my value system. This is how I show up. But when she came into my life, there was a whole nother level,
Mm.
and again it was like, okay, this is here for me to become better. This is here, this allows me to actually show up and be even better for the world as well.
Yeah,
And yeah, she's allowed me to grow in ways that I can't even express,
yeah,
that I don't think a lot of people, until they enter into a union and step into that space of unconditional love, can kind of can't really comprehend. It's been amazing. It's been absolutely amazing. And what's cool is because I've had the opportunity to show up in all these ways, what has come through abundance wise, has been remarkable. And I'm just so excited because I know it's still like, I'm definitely here in the moment, enjoying all of it, fully present, but I am very curious and excited to see what continues to unfold within our relationship and within our reality.
hmm
Our community has grown significantly. Our work is so meaningful and passionate and fulfilling. Our home is incredibly special. It's been epic stepping into this space.
I love that, man. And I think what
Yeah.
you said is so accurate about why people might avoid relationships because
Yeah.
actually, to a degree, the avoidance of a relationship is actually avoidance of self
Yeah, for
because
sure.
there's nowhere to hide. If you're
Hmm.
around someone all of the time, they're going to see every bit of you that has yet to be clarified, every little bit of the shadow that shows up, everywhere in which you abandon all that you could be. That
Yeah.
it's going to be seen, and sometimes I don't want to be in the acknowledgement of where I'm not showing
Yeah.
my fullest. Like you said, you get
Yeah.
lazy on your own. And what I've found is that, if you imagine like the map of consciousness, like this idea of like these levels of consciousness, I don't believe we live within one. I believe we have different levels of consciousness throughout. Across our life within different
Hmm.
areas.
Hmm.
I think some people can be very evolved on their own,
Yeah.
spiritually
It's a good
very
point.
evolved, but then maybe they have a lot of things relationally, maybe from, formative years and their early childhood dynamics,
Yeah.
where relationally they actually haven't stepped into that same level of evolution. So then they feel like this
Hmm.
yo-yo of feeling very evolved spiritually. Then in the relationship, it's like this wild storm, this
Yeah.
volcanic eruptions, fear,
Yeah.
doubt, unworthiness starts arising because it's a different dimension of life.
Hmm. I agree with that tenfold. Um, and what I wanted to add too, what's really neat is the uh when we really step into, specifically in relationships, when we step into our divinity, which I think for a man is, the definition of a divine masculine for me is, I love unconditionally. I love unconditionally, which allows then for the woman to then step into her divinity, which is I surrender, I trust, and that's like, I think a lot of, um, at least for me, and I think for many men, feel is that kind of responsibility. When you start loving your partner in such a way, she'll start watching you. Actually, she actually watches everything that you do to lead, to guide, so that she can follow. And I think that is a huge, huge weight that a lot of people either aren't conscious of or prepared for. And it does require you to start, like if you're sleeping in, your woman will follow. If you're staying up late, your woman will follow. If you're eating poor food, a lot of times your woman will follow you. And so when you wake up and honor yourself, and you're getting in your meditations, your practices, when you're training hard, when you're not distracting yourself through your devices or through TV, when you're on top of things, when you're really fully present, she'll follow you into that space.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it's wild. It's wild because I can feel it. I can actually feel her watching, to make, not to make sure of anything, but for me to lead her, and for her to trust in me. And that's a big one. I think that's a big one. And I really have learned to love that. I absolutely love it, and it makes me better. Yeah, it makes me look at myself in a lot of ways.
Yeah, they're really, really great points. It's almost like we are we are called to step forward to be all that we could become. And to be trusted is, do I trust that I can commit to being all that I actually am and not this diluted expression of what
Mm.
I am? And that doesn't come without effort. It doesn't come without commitment. And
Yeah,
maybe,
self-reflection.
yeah,
Yeah. Hmm.
yeah. I think to be fully trusted. I think we see a lot now in relationships where this isn't the fundamental dynamic, where there isn't that trust across, where a woman can't open and receive because of trust,
Hmm.
because actually there are plenty of men that aren't showing up because they don't trust themselves. Their they've abandoned their greatness.
Mm.
It feels to me that a lot of people have kind of, yeah, abandoned their greatness of uniquely, and now that greatness shows up uniquely in every individual. It can show up in so many different ways, but I think each individual has a version of them in their greatness,
Mm.
whatever that might be.
Well, you know what I realize is that I think that greatness is to stay unconditional. I think that's like, if you really zoom out, that's really what it is. It's like the ability to stay in love during all moments. And as a man, if you can stay unconditional in all moments, right? And you don't close your heart, that is where the trust is really is created. That's when she can fully surrender. You know, when you don't become frustrated in situations, when you, especially specifically with her. And I think a lot of people are still learning to, one, not identify with their programming and conditioning from their childhood, from their experiences. I think a lot of men don't know how to alchemize and regulate energy, emotion, their emotions. Um, Most men are very much still asleep and identifying with the false self. And so, you know, men in general, when they're consistently getting triggered, or when they're consistently closing, falling into judgment, frustration, aggravation, avoidance, and what have you, those are all the moments um, that I think is causing relationships not to be as amazing or divine as they will be and should be. When I started realizing that within myself, like when my woman is working through her emotions, do I close? Do I fall into frustration? Do I try to fix? Do I operate from my ego? Is that was such a big shift.
Mhm.
Being able to stay present with her, stay in unconditional love with her, hold that space for her so that she can work through those things. And that's where a lot of safety came in. Um, and the only way I'm able to do that is through my own work, is through my own practices, through connecting with God each and every day, through my breath work and meditations, through my behaviors and my actions, through my atomic habits. And so that's such a big part. And if I'm walking that path, she sees God, she sees the unconditional within me. And that's really what I think they're trying to see, whether they're conscious of it or not, is they're trying to see, are you operating from that path? Are you operating with God, with source? And that's what God is. God is unconditional. There is no wavering from God, and there is no closing from God. And I think that's what our partners are looking for. They're looking for that unwavering. Can you just be steady, and not just with her, but maybe with future children, or with people, or in circumstances when they become hard or difficult, when those trials or tribulations actually show up. Can you stay stoic? Can you stay in love?
Mhm.
And that's what I really focused on. is that ability to always stay open through all moments. Um, that's been everything, and that just allows her to fully trust within me. And I think that is the hardest part for most people, whether they're in relationships or not. Most of us are still very much in the trance, identifying with the false self, as I mentioned. And I think a lot of us don't know how to regulate, so we can't hold space. You know, if you're an individual that's working all these hours and you're deep in the matrix, even within your work, and you're not eating well and you're taking that low vibration on, you're watching, and listening to certain shows or music that is of low vibration, and you're engaging in all of these things that you're not simply aware of, um, you'll have a very hard time holding space for things, whether it's traffic, whether it's your woman, whether it's your kids, whether it's real challenges in life. And so I think that is what really allows me, is when I started getting into understanding the laws or principles of the universe, vibration, frequencies, um, conscious consumerism. That was a big shift for me. It really allows me to hold this space, and the fact that I breathe every day, and that I practice presence through different modalities and techniques really gives me the ability, because if I didn't do those things, and a lot of times when I do close, as you asked before in the beginning, what are those moments? The times that I actually close is when I skip my meditations. It's when I
Mm.
engage in poor food. It's when I stay up too late. It's when I'm on my phone too much. It's when I'm giving my attention to things that are of low vibration. And so if I pay attention to what I'm engaging in, what I'm consuming, what I'm taking in, what I'm bringing on through my food, my music, what have you, people, places, and things, I have a wonderful ability to stay aware, to stay in my higher mind, if you will, to stay conscious.
Yeah, I think media is a big one as well. You mentioned food, and I think to some people, okay, to plenty of people, they're still unconscious to what they eat, but that one seems more easier. It's easier to observe, but I think the things that we
Mm.
might watch or consume on social media or YouTube, and I feel like
It's a
most
little
people,
bit harder, yeah,
yeah,
be
yeah,
aware of that.
it doesn't seem as obvious as I am consuming this. I'm actually
Hmm.
taking this in, and this is now interacting with me internally the way that
Yeah,
food
yeah.
would.
Food would. Yeah. That's what's so I think that's what we're going to be stepping into globally here in the next 5 years. I think everybody's going to understand that everything is vibration, nothing rests. There's such thing as social contagion, where you spend your time, what you're taking in, what you're consuming, to your music, to the television shows that you watch, and then you'll be able to see really how you feel. You do take on the energy, and so when you start paying attention to vibration, frequencies, or what have you, I mean, even down to the products that you're putting on your skin, to the clothes that you are wearing, um, like for instance, and we can actually like give an example, a shirt. Let's just say a shirt. Well, what dictates this shirt to be a high vibration, a high frequency versus a low vibration, low frequency? And there's a few things. The material that it's made out of. If you're wearing polyester or some form of spandex or plastic, if you will, that shirt will be of a lower vibration, a lower frequency than if it were to be made from organic wool, bamboo, or linen. And these are, you can actually find out the hertz of that shirt, the frequency of that shirt. And so there's a wonderful example of how you can kind of start playing with vibration and frequencies in your clothes. And then you can go one step farther. The company's intentions, because it's not just like physical things. It's also your words, your thoughts, and also your intentions that go into things that dictate that frequency, that vibration. So if I find a shirt and it's made from organic linen and it's made from a ethical company that creates the product ethically, and their mission statement or their intention is to be of service, is to create a product of a higher frequency to serve this, and it also is careful of how it extracts from the planet. It's careful of how the people that work for them, and they treat them well. And so there's all this mindfulness, all these loving intentions, these vibrations going into this shirt product. And then you take your money that you worked for, which is also vibration, energy, and you do this exchange. Now you take on that energy, and this shirt isn't just a shirt. There's a lot of energy and a lot of it's a high frequency going into it. So that's how I look at all things. I look at my
Mm.
food this way. I look at my shirts this way. I look at my music this way. People as well,
Mm.
down to the smallest things. Like even my carpet. Like when I was buying a rug, I pay attention to the materials that are made in this rug, and I'm also paying attention to who created this rug. And so I look at all those little things, and I have individuals that come through to my home for work, whether it be through breathwork meditation, to mentoring, or plant medicine, what have you. And they can truly feel the vibrational difference when they step into my house, because everything in my house, for the most part, is high frequency, is high vibration, even down to my furniture. I make sure that my furniture is created and made with certain materials and created with loving intentions from individuals. And so there is true feng shui, so to speak, within my home, from my coffee table to my bookshelf, um, what have you. And it's something I really started paying attention to a few years ago, and it has made such a change in my life, because again, when we are, say, unconsciously engaging in low vibrational things, it's much easier for us to drop into the ego self again. Because that's what I really started asking was, is like, all right, I understand that I am spirit in human form, that I am consciousness having this beautiful experience. How can I remember? How can I stay awake during these moments? That's what I started asking myself. And I realized, like, oh, well, it's all about how I speak, it's how I think, and it's how I consciously consume. I'm like, all right, well, that's easy enough. I have to pay attention to the water I'm drinking. I have to pay attention to the music I'm listening to. I have to pay attention to the businesses that I'm supporting. I have to pay attention to the people I'm spending time with. And I started looking at that, became very, very aware of that. And I started, and taking my time, of course, switching those things out. And with that, man, it gives me all the ability in the world to stay in loving awareness. Like I'm not like fighting uphill, so to speak. You know what I mean? I think a lot of times we want to stay in love. We want to have the ability to keep our hearts open, but we lack the awareness of the frequency or vibration of the things that we engage in all day long. And so that is a big one. And I think that's also where we feel the most resistance from the shadow self, from the ego self, because it likes its things. It likes its known. It doesn't want to change its behaviors. It doesn't want to let that go because it's tied to its identity. It's tied to these traditions, what have you. And I think that's actually the hardest part. We awaken and then we come back into the real, or not the real reality, but the reality that we're currently in, and it's of low vibration, and now we have to make change, and that's through our food, our fucking clothes, our people, what have you. It's quite the undertaking, even down to the shampoo that you're using, the deodorant that you're using, the toothpaste that you're using. It can be quite the overhaul.
Yeah, I can really see that making those decisions. It's almost like, you know, someone might feel like they have a lucky pair of socks or a lucky pair of underwear, right? And when they put that on, even just the fact that they've decided that about that item, it might actually create a difference in the way in which they show up to the world because of it.
For sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And now I'm just thinking about the clothes. If you imagine taking the clothes out of a wardrobe and I bought this because it was a commitment to love. Now, as you put that on, this is my
Hmm.
commitment to love. There's a continuous reminder there. And
Yeah.
it's interesting because for anyone listening to this, depending on where they're at in their belief systems, it's funny when people talk about placebo and they'll mention it and to discount like but it's only but it's just placebo. What I find fascinating is the word just. Like,
Yeah.
what we're talking about is magic. It's not just, it's
Yeah.
magic. So
Yeah.
even if, like, the effects it has on us unconsciously, as I chose this from love, and now that is a reminder to come from love, what does that do to the way in which I show up to the world, even if it's a 10% change?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
stacks up quite dramatically over time if it's in every single thing you choose. And that
Yeah.
staying conscious as a reminder, because the biggest thing is we forget, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We
We fall back
forget.
asleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The falling back asleep is the hardest part. We have most of the time when people first have their awakening, they're not even aware that they have their awakening. And awakening isn't linear either. There's an awakening and a sleep, an awakening and a sleep, an awakening and a sleep until you become conscious of what this actually is and you really start changing behaviors or understanding how to navigate. That's a lot of what most people are experiencing, these awakenings and then falling back asleep, so to speak, in the trance. And I like to use, instead of the word placebo, I use the word Godsivo, because that's really what this is like you're using divine power. Um, you're working with the laws and the principles. That's what's beautiful about understanding the Hermetic principles, or just the laws and principles that guide and that are guiding this universe. And it's no longer a belief; it's just physics. Like when you really see things as strictly vibration, including your body, everything is vibration, everything is atoms, nothing rests, everything is always moving, and everything has a frequency, including your physical body, and what you engage in dictates what that frequency is going to be, and the universe will mirror that frequency. That's insane. That's insane to know, and we understand it as fact. It's proven. That is huge to really, like, oh damn, so what I eat, what I listen to, what I consume will dictate the frequency that I am vibrating at, and therefore that is my reality in the external. That's what shows up for me.
Yeah.
Like when I really locked that in and understood that, it becomes completely my responsibility in how I show up. There's no more blaming anything or blaming anybody. And it's what's wild is the law of correspondence is what we're talking about, which is the second law of the Hermetic principles. The law of correspondence, as within, so without. And I've seen it now literally in real time. I see it in real time within my clients, within my environment. I truly think that we are, depending on our frequency or vibration, that we are consistently dipping in or dipping out of different realities as we walk through our day. I really do believe that, depending on my frequency. So say I pick a week where I don't honor my stuff, where I'm not meditating, so I'm not alchemizing any energy that's sticking to me. I'm not getting really still present to reconnect with my highest self, my highest mind, loving awareness, my spirit self. I'm engaging in poor eating. I'm watching a lot of low vibrational TV, what have you. I'm not grounding, not getting my sunlight. And so my frequency literally will drop in my body, and my vibration in real time. My clients do the same thing. They have no idea that I'm operating in this way. They fall off, they stop doing their meditations. They literally are mirroring me from worlds away. They just fall right into it, and I encounter more irritable people in that process, more trials and tribulations in that process because of my frequency. It's literally mirroring me in real time. I'm meeting more jerks on the road. I'm having more problems. It's easier for me to also fall into that um, wavelength, that conscious wavelength of scarcity and fear and judgment because of that. I'm more susceptible at that space. I've noticed. I put out a really cool post the other day, and it was a really fun one because I'm using this example that I just shared because I kind of did this. I mean, I didn't fall off the rails, but I found myself just a bit more, I wouldn't even say tired, just very, very relaxed one week, to where I didn't really feel like training too much. I didn't feel like really doing anything. I found myself just wanted to like kind of relax and sleep and what have you. And what I did, though, unfortunately, is I fell into checking out as opposed to charging up. And checking out, what I mean is by just being on my phone or watching too much South Park, what have you. I eat high vibrational foods, but I cooked less from home and was ordering out a little bit more. Still really good food, but not as good as cooking at home. So I was engaging in checking out. So I wasn't doing my grounding as much, my sunbathing as much. I skip some breath work and meditations. Um, and so I went to this. So long story short, I went to the Sprouts that I always go to. And what's wild is that this Sprouts has a lot of things that most other Sprouts don't have. And I truly think it's because I vibrate at a unique frequency that this reality for me is specifically aligned with me. I have not just one choice of raw cheese, because most people can't even get access to raw cheese or grass-fed, grass-finished beef or other items like ones that I have at this store, but I have 10 different raw cheeses to choose from.
Mm.
I have a plethora of foods that align with my values and my vibration. And it's in many different things. And what's funny is I show up to the same store that I always do, and this is just a fun theory, of course, but I show up and I always buy these organic mixed nuts from this bin, and for whatever reason, I can't find them. I can't find them. This is the week that I've been kind of engaging in lower vibrational practices, behaviors. I can't find them. And there's an individual that comes up to the store, and he even asks like, "Oh, what are you looking for?" And I'm like, "I'm looking for these organic nuts. I get them all the time." And right away he looks at me, he's like, "Never had them, never sold those." And I'm like, "No, I buy them all the time." And he actually has, it's almost like he was taking it personal that I was like, "No, I," so he had a bit of irritability to him. And I was like, I even caught the irritability and I felt myself become a little contracted. And I'm like, "No, like I literally have been buying them here for the last like 6 months. Like and this is like the Mandela effect too, which is kind of funny. It's like here I am, like I've taken a picture of the code, I bring it up to the register, I've done the whole thing. I know I bought these nuts from the store. So he's also like gaslighting me in a sense. And I'm like, no, and he's like, no, you must have been at a different store, is actually what he said, which really was funny. And I was like, damn. And so I was able to reflect on that. And, a part of me believes that I was at a different store. I was at a different frequency. I was at a different frequency sprout, so to speak. And um, a lot of the things at that store were matching the vibration that I was at due to the week that I was kind of
Mm.
living in, so to speak. And not only did my nuts not be there, I also was working or, sharing space with an individual that was irritated, that was of low vibration. I've never seen him before at the store, and we've gone to that store a million times. So I believe I was possibly in an alternate reality, if you will. I think that's how it's working, though. Like, but I just wanted to share that as kind of a fun way to look at it.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? It makes you
Yeah.
wonder. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but I found this year as an example that there's certain changes I have made, and then I've gone to try and watch something or listen to something that a year ago I would have, and I actually couldn't. It actually almost hurt me to do it. So, for
Mm,
example, I started listening to a lot of worship music.
mm,
And there's a certain frequency that is at because of the people that are singing, what they're connecting to. Certainly, some it's transmissional. And then I just tried listening to some regular music that I would have listened to when I was working out before. And it was like, oh, like it felt like it hurt. I had to stop it. I'm like,
yeah.
I can't listen to this. And
Yep.
equally, I used to watch the Amazon show, The Boys.
Mm,
And it's funny because I actually watch no like shows, no series, apart from this one for whatever reason. One time it must have caught me a few years ago, probably during lockdown or something, I don't know. And they had a new season come out. And I started to watch it and I watched a couple of episodes. Then I watched another one. And it was like, I felt like I was actually being violated
mm,
by watching it. And it's like, oh man, this doesn't resonate now. Like
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
well aware it's not real, but even like what it's still there's a relationship going on. I'm in a relationship with it right now, and it
Yeah.
it did not feel
I
good.
love that. I love that. What you're touching on is really kind of cool. Because I think what we do is we really get in touch with our true self, that frequency. And so our bodies are always communicating with us when we engage in certain things. And so we can learn to listen to that misalignment. So when you're watching that show, you're taking on that vibration, it's dropping our vibration, which is causing a misalignment from our truest self. And this happens all the time. So for our listeners, for example, say you're doing this wonderful thing, you're working out, you're eating clean, what have you, you're doing all these things, and then you decide to engage in, say, staying up late and have this epic cheat meal,
Mm.
right? This epic cheat meal where you engage in lower vibrational foods. You get your pizza, you get your burgers, you order from this restaurant you haven't ordered from in a while, right? And then you almost start feeling what many call guilt. It's not guilt though. That's what the brain creates, the story of guilt or shame, but it's not guilt or shame. What it is it's your body telling you are no longer aligned with
Yeah.
your highest self. And so I started using that as a tool, as as a sign to see if this is actually good for me. So for example, like I'm not opposed to checking out. I'm not opposed to engaging in yummy, delicious, savory foods. I'm not opposed to going out to eat or any of these things or staying up late and enjoying it. But I learned that there's like a balance to certain things, and if I kind of overfill my cup and I seek too much pleasure, I start to feel the misalignment. And
Mm.
so what I do is I kind of use it as a tool. And I remember, I would kind of really have a wonderful week of my practices and what have you. And Sunday was more of my relaxation, more so checking out, and for a while, my normal Sunday was like, I wake up, I'm going to rest from the gym, I'm actually going to smoke weed at 10 a.m. and relax. And like, there's going to be fights on later. I'm going to watch some cool fights. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to enjoy and check out. And then the next morning, I would feel this feeling, this energy going through me. And I started paying attention to it. I'm like, oh, I feel like this is a misalignment from my behaviors yesterday. And
Mm.
so as opposed to being like, well, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that, I started finding this balance. So instead of just getting up and just kind of leaning into like this checking out or pleasure seeking day, I would like, well, you know what, Justin, why don't we actually wake up, do our meditation on Sunday, our breath work and meditation? Why don't we actually go do some movement, have a really good training session at the gym? Maybe go to Barton Springs and go for a swim and lay in the sun. All things that I love to do. And then, later on that evening, and why don't we fast for most of the day if you do want to enjoy a savory meal? And instead of watching 6 hours of TV, you watch maybe two. And then the next morning, I check to see if that vibration is there where it is, and it's not there.
Mm.
I'm like, oh, there you go. This is where it balances. I didn't overfill my cup. I honored myself. I still engaged. This feels good. This feels good right here. And that's the following morning. So I can kind of play with this sensation, this feeling, not create guilt or shame around it, but use it as a tool to
Mm.
see if I'm misaligned or not. And so that has been really helpful for me. And that's one of the things that I really share with my clients as well. Use it as a tool.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think, you said honoring yourself. I think maybe that's a big part of what it is. I think we can, if we're more aware, and I think there's a lot of people that they are not actually, they're so disconnected from themselves so frequently that they aren't aware of when they dishonor themselves. But when you
Mm,
are doing things which is in pursuit of, I reference this a lot, it's kind of pursuing the summum bonum, the ultimate and highest good in our own life, when we are in pursuit of that, I think then when we take part in things that don't align with that, we almost feel a dishonoring,
hmm
not and dishonoring of self, but in ways it's almost like like I actually disconnected from God in a
Yeah.
way in that moment, because when I'm fully connected, those things actually don't call to me in the same way. In fact, fasting can be as enjoyable as any meal.
Yeah, yeah. It's so true. You're nailing it. And what's cool is it's like when we don't let the ego create guilt or shame from the experience, right? Because these are just experiences, right? And you have to experience them to then maybe sit with and see if this is aligning or not. And so experiences are wonderful, and have the experiences that are needed for you to look within and be like, oh, does this align with me? And if you feel it doesn't, don't allow the ego to come through the back door to create any shame or guilt around it, because usually that will only perpetuate poor behaviors. Usually that actually feeds it, because the guilt or shame drops you into an even lower vibration. Then you're susceptible to
Yeah.
do a more unconscious behaviors and like, well, like, fuck it, man, I'll just eat more shitty food, or fuck it, I just do this or that. And so just get good about, like, the ego is the only thing that will create shame or guilt, the small me. And so if you can recognize that and just realize, like, oh, this is a vibration within me, and not let your brain create a story around it, but more so understand, like, oh, I'm just not aligned right now. What can I do to get aligned right now? I'm like, I'm gonna go sit in the sun. I'm gonna go do a little bit of breath work. I'm gonna go for a walk. I'm gonna move my body, and you can alchemize that energy, so to speak, and fairly quickly. So I would just always look at that feeling, that sensation that doesn't feel good, that is misaligned, just see it as an opportunity to be like, oh, okay, these behaviors didn't serve me. Well, what can I do now to shift this and alchemize this energy to step into my higher self again? And so, and that's a great space to operate from, as opposed to creating shame or guilt around that, which has been very helpful.
Yeah, I once heard, and I can't remember from who or where, but feeling guilt is a rejection of God's forgiveness.
I like that too. That's great.
And really, it's realizing that, like you said, that shame or guilt really is just a signpost saying, "Hey, brother, hey, sister, come back home to the big house. Come back to that higher self. Come back to truth."
Hmm.
Because the divine is always calling us back home, and to feel guilt keeps that separation, and it's
Yes,
actually a
yes,
refusal of
yes,
the forgiveness of God, which is the forgiveness of
yes.
you can always come
Self.
back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's such a fun way to start, approaching our experiences too. And sometimes you really have to see what those experiences are about. And I think that's important too. I think a lot of times, um, you have to kind of walk through it, and know what you want and know what you like, and kind of test the waters. I mean, you don't have to get burned by the stove 20 times to learn, maybe just once, maybe just twice, it really kind of depends on the individual. But I think we end up having to touch the stove in certain ways here and there to see if things align, if these things do serve us, if these are the things that we do desire, and paying attention to our intuition, our inner knowing, reflecting each and every day allows us to go through these experiences and learn and grow and evolve fairly quickly.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. Hey, Justin, are you familiar with Rupert Spira?
No.
I think you'd really like him. He, I'll drop a link, and any of the listeners, I really think I think you would resonate with him. He's in his 60s, been a spiritual teacher for many, many years, but he just has this transmission of this deep connection and deep peace, and that I am
Mm.
awareness is so much of where he operates from. I'm actually at a small gathering with him
Oh, wonderful.
at the end of this month on the 27th. But yeah, I think he's someone. Some people almost transmit it, and the first moment I heard him speak, it almost just pulled me into that space
Ooh,
because he's there. You can just
he's speaking truth.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's cool. I love that. That's like the coolest part, when you're drawn to certain people, individuals, certain things. It's like, ooh, you can feel the alignment, that it is there, that truth is there. I think the hardest part is most people don't know, what that feels like, so they can't really gauge what that is, trust what that is a lot of times. Um, I think for someone like you and myself, who essentially, I think, really get into our practices, and we get into the stillness, we're able to remember, truth, so to speak, or in some capacities, remember that we are awareness. Um, and I think that's the hardest part, is most individuals are never still, ever. They're always stimulated through the day, and they're operating at a very low vibration. So it's incredibly hard for them to even almost sense that individual that you're speaking of, like sense that level of peace. In fact, it probably almost will mirror them in their ego in such a profound way, where they will almost like walk in the different direction. They'll like walk around it, if you will, or create some story or narrative about this individual, so it can't really, see it or take it in. But I love that when you are tapped in, when you are connecting with your higher self, when you are connected with God on a daily basis through our practices and through our actions, you're able to see these individuals for who they are, feel the truth within them. And that's really cool. That's really cool that you get to see this individual at the end of the month. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. He's from the UK, and yeah, he's doing this small gathering in a house in Oxford, and usually he does like big retreats, and he has a big audience, and has written books, and there just happens to be
That's
this
awesome.
little gathering. So yeah, I'm delighted to be going to that.
Yeah, definitely would love to check out his work. I mean, I feel that way with individuals like Eckhart Tolle. Whenever he speaks, Eckhart's a wonderful light. Aya Shante is another wonderful light. I mean, when Ram Dass was alive, similar vibes like whenever he spoke, and so yeah, that's going to be exciting. That's something I definitely would love to get more into, or at least have the opportunity to share some space with some of these very wise individuals.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've been a huge fan of Eckhart for many years, and
yeah.
I actually did his course, being a teacher of presence,
Oh wow,
last year, and Rupert reminded me of him in many ways. And
very
it's
cool.
funny, what you say about certain people get turned off by. Whenever I hear Eckhart speak, it's like he reaches into my body and just goes, and relax.
Yeah,
But some
yeah.
people, when I've tried to present Eckhart previously, that he talks too
Hmm.
slow, I can't handle it. And it's actually he's present, and it's just
Hmm.
showing that I need him to hurry up and get to his point. It's like
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
a beautiful irony in that.
I love that, and he even mentions that in his books. He'll even say like, "Hey, if you can't grasp this, that just it's okay. You're not quite here yet consciously." And me and my woman were actually talking about creating a book list that can maybe gradually introduce these ways of thinking, consciousness, what have you, awareness. And so we were like, even coming with ideas like, the first book for maybe someone to read would be probably a Joe Dispenza, You Are the Placebo would be a wonderful book for like an entry level. And then probably Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach would be another good one. And then following that would be The Untethered Soul. And then after The Untethered Soul, I would say another Joe Dispenza, maybe Becoming Supernatural. And after Supernatural, then you would have The Power of Now by Eckhart, and then The New Earth by Eckhart would be a good order. And then Ida Shante, Becoming Nobody would be the next one. So you have like this gradual build up, so it's not like hitting you all at once, or at least you can conceptualize it. So yeah, I almost want to come up with a list of books that can maybe speak to different levels, right? Because everybody's at a different levels of their awakening. And even for myself, one of the things I really loved about Ram Dass is that Ram Dass, he conveyed consciousness in such a way that he was almost able to enter at any level of where somebody may be at. And I remember this for myself. I remember when I first listened to Alan Watts, um, he spoke in such a way where he has some sass to him. He has some sass to him. He's very poetic. He sometimes can almost speak in code, even, right? And so like my ego at that time at that level didn't like him. I was like, I don't really care for this guy. You know what I mean? So then I graduated more towards Ram Dass, who just spoke, and like how you just expressed how Eckhart Tolle makes you feel. That's what Ram Dass did for me. He like buttered me up, and he welcomed me into that space. But then as I became more aware through my experiences, I ended up falling absolutely in love with Alan Watts and the way that he conveys and the way that he speaks and his sassiness and his poetic stuff. And so I think we just have to find an entry level for different people and see what that looks like. And but yeah, I think that's one of the things I really started focusing on, because I remember I used to convey in such a way that I would trigger a lot of egos, and they didn't really care to hear what I had to say. So that's one of the things I focused on, just as a mentor or a teacher myself. How can I speak to the mass in such a way where everybody can hear me, everybody feels welcome, everybody feels loved and safe. So, but yeah, that's a whole skill, that's a whole art for sure.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think knowing where someone is at, what paradigm or level of consciousness they are in, and it's not a problem no matter where anyone is, but how can I help guide them from where they are to transcend to the next level of consciousness or the next paradigm that takes them on that journey.
Yeah, I mean that was something that actually came up for me. I'm just gonna charge my phone. That's something that came up for me a lot. That came up for me a lot because I remember when I went on a podcast once, and and this is actually a fun story. I went on a podcast once, and I was talking about vibration and the Hermetic principles, and I was also talking about the law of one, with Ra
Mhm.
and what have you. And I was like really simplifying the human experience in such a way. I was like oversimplifying it to where, for sure, if anybody listened to it, for the most part, their egos would get provoked, and it probably wouldn't have been accepted in any capacity, to be honest. And I remember leaving that podcast. I remember leaving that podcast being like, I think I sounded like a dick. I think I sounded like a bit of a know-it-all, or I knew, or I just knew that I didn't like how I came off because I think that it would have rubbed a lot of people and it wouldn't have been helpful, essentially. And I just remember like, man, I really don't care for that podcast to come out. And so the next day I did a meditation, and this was a very, very powerful meditation. And it was a full like DMT experience, and this entity literally appears, and it was the size of the entire. I was in my room, but it was the size of the entire sky. This entity, and it was. I swear it was Ra. It was like the presence of Ra, the sun god, and he like literally. I feel physical weight like push me deep into the ground, push me, push me, push me, and then my whole left side starts having a burning sensation, not in a painful way, just a burning sensation, and it felt like energy was transferring through into my heart and down my left arm, and I could tell it was my ego because I was speaking with my ego on the podcast,
Mm.
and then the message came through, and it says, "Stay humble," was the message. Stay humble. Stay humble, stay humble. And I remember smiling, like, okay, yeah, I totally hear you. And I agree. I felt that way when I left the podcast. I agree. Thank you. And what was cool is the podcast never came out for whatever reason. It just never came out. And I was like, how funny. It never dropped. And I was like, this is really cool. I love how the universe works. But it was a wonderful message for me on how I can learn to convey and learn to speak and learn to share and learn to hold space that allows all levels to feel welcome, that allows all egos to feel soothed, if you will. Um, so yeah, that's cool that we kind of chatted about that, the different entry levels for sure.
Yeah, it's like it's okay to be wherever you're currently at because
Hmm.
there's this full spectrum of which I think actually is part of the maturation process throughout one's lifetime. We are not just static, we are evolutionary, not just
Hmm.
evolution in the sense of from the point of the beginning of existence through to now, but within one's lifetime we evolve and
Yeah.
we're just on that journey of evolution.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's what really we're trying to step into is like, how can we be a good space holder for all levels? And again, like, how can we sit with such a level of presence with individuals for their awakening to actually happen, for them to also awaken in their own timeline without infringing on the free will, of those individuals. I think that's such a huge part is like allowing that space for curiosity to unfold, um, and you're just kind of like a guide, a signpost, if you will, a safe space, a safe container for them to become curious, and that's a fun spot to kind of operate from and be in, and that's really kind of what I made my work about, is to be essentially just a very very safe container, a safe space for people to become curious about who they are, and explore that.
Yeah, I love that. It was just yesterday I was writing this down. I was just riffing that everybody holds the keys to their own awakening, and my role is to help them find where they put their keys.
Yeah, I like that. That's
Yeah,
very cool, man.
yeah.
Is your partner coming back and forth between the UK and the States? At this time, are you guys doing long distance?
Yeah, so it's been that's been part of the. It's like logistically. has been
Yeah.
uh, what's the word? Let's just say tricky for now.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't been the easiest thing logistically, and there's been like it's created like a lot of things to navigate that feels like it's not necessarily yours, but there's external things to navigate
Mm.
within the logistics that have created a little more. And I feel I'm being tentative because I'm on the fence of just sharing what it is. However, there's definitely an element of sensitivity around it. So I'm just riding the line of do I share or would that be
I
not
feel you.
wise because of it's not just a share of my own thing.
Correct, correct. Yeah, that makes sense. That's good awareness. That's wonderful awareness.
Yeah.
Do you see yourself possibly like, are you like coming to the States? Is that something you're playing with here and there?
I mean, I would definitely like to travel over. I have my daughter here. So travel, yes, but the difficulty would be a
Me
permanent.
moving, yeah, that's very true, especially when there's children involved. Yeah, so there's a lot of little things. Man, it was really great to catch up with you, though. I really appreciate always when you reach out. I love the work that you're doing too, by the way. I love how you are of service, and yeah, it's been really cool to getting to know you. What have we been? We've done this is our third podcast, I think,
Yeah,
together that you've had me on. I think we and you have known each other for almost 2 years now.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. Absolutely, man. And I always resonate. You feel like one of my people.
Yeah, likewise.
So yeah, it's always beautiful, and thank you for coming on. Where's the best place for people to find you?
Uh, you know, Instagram is always a wonderful one. Justin D. Lovato, Just Love, and the website nirvanamindbody.com. But yeah, yeah, those are the two best places to find me. Come check me out if you are an individual that is seeking any guidance, would like to have a conversation, would like someone to hold space for you as you navigate. I am here to be of service, and yeah, reach out. You are supported.
Beautiful. Hey, brother, thanks so much for doing this again.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much.